The thick acquisition contract slammed onto the polished boardroom table with a deafening bang. Coffee splashed across confidential documents. A luxury fountain pen spun toward the edge of the table. One elderly businessman froze, his trembling hands refusing to move while tears slowly gathered in his eyes. Across the table, two calm executives stood silently, watching him without a word. 20 years earlier, rain hammered against the Carter family home as thunder rolled across Ravenport. Inside, laughter filled the dining room. Grace Carter placed another serving of food onto Nathan's plate before gently tapping Olivia's shoulder. "Eat before your food gets cold." Olivia laughed. "Mom, Nathan always gets extra." Nathan grinned. "That's because I'm still growing." "You've been saying that since you were 10, Olivia teased. Grace smiled warmly. Victor Carter watched his family, forcing himself to smile despite the heavy weight crushing his chest. For one brief moment, everything looked perfect. But hidden behind that smile was a secret capable of destroying every person sitting at that table. Grace noticed Victor barely touched his food. "You've hardly eaten." "I'm just tired." "Tired?" Grace asked softly. "Or worried?" Victor looked away. "Work has been stressful." Nathan chuckled. "When is work not stressful?" Everyone laughed except Victor. His eyes drifted toward the rain-covered window. He wasn't looking at the storm. He was looking at the future. A future he feared he could no longer protect. Dinner ended with Olivia and Nathan clearing the dishes while Grace washed plates. Victor quietly walked into the living room. Rain streamed down the glass as he stood staring into the darkness outside. His breathing became uneven. Behind his back, hidden beneath his folded jacket, was a thick, confidential business folder. Inside were overdue loan agreements, property documents, company debts, default notices. Everything he had worked for was collapsing. Grace quietly entered the room. "You've been standing here for 5 minutes." Victor quickly hid the folder farther behind his back. "I didn't hear you." Grace stepped closer. "You've been different lately." "I'm fine." "No." She gently touched his arm. "You don't look fine." Victor forced another smile. "It's only business." She searched his eyes. "Victor, you know you can tell me anything." For several seconds, he almost confessed. He almost handed her the folder. He almost admitted everything. Instead, he kissed her forehead. "I'll fix it." Grace frowned. "You always say that." "And I always do." She smiled faintly, choosing to believe him. "I'll hold you to that." Victor watched her walk away before closing his eyes. "I'm sorry," he whispered after she disappeared. Outside, his cell phone vibrated. Unknown number. He answered immediately. "This is Victor." A cold voice replied. "You've had enough time." Victor's face turned pale. "I just need a little longer." "No. The bank has approved nothing. Our investors want their money. If you don't sign tomorrow, you lose everything." Victor tightened his grip on the phone. "My family doesn't know. They don't need to. They'll find out soon enough." The call ended. Victor stood frozen beneath the porch roof while rain splashed around him. He slowly opened the confidential folder. Every page screamed failure. Every signature represented another mistake. Another debt. Another promise he couldn't keep. Inside the doorway, Grace quietly watched him. She couldn't hear the conversation, but she saw everything else. The trembling hands. The defeated shoulders. The terrified eyes. Something was terribly wrong. Victor finally turned around. Seeing Grace startled him. "You scared me." She crossed her arms. "Who was that?" "A client." "In the rain?" "They're overseas." Grace wasn't convinced. "And what's in that folder?" Victor instinctively hid it behind his back. "Nothing important." She looked directly into his eyes. "You've never lied well." He laughed nervously. "I'm not lying." Grace sighed. "If something is wrong, don't carry it alone." Victor wanted to tell her. More than anything. But shame chained his tongue. "I'll handle it." Grace reluctantly nodded. "I trust you." Those words pierced deeper than any accusation. "I know." That night, Victor barely slept. He watched Grace sleeping peacefully beside him. Nathan's laughter echoed faintly from down the hallway. Olivia was still studying in her room. His family believed tomorrow would be another ordinary day. He knew better. Before dawn, Victor quietly got out of bed. He stood beside the family photographs lining the hallway. His wedding picture, the twins as toddlers, family vacations, birthday parties, 20 years of memories. He gently touched each frame. "I'm sorry." He picked up a suitcase already packed the previous evening. One final glance. One final breath. Then he walked out the front door without making a sound. Minutes later, Grace stretched across the bed. Her hand reached for Victor. The mattress was cold. She opened her eyes. Victor. Silence. She smiled sleepily. You're making coffee already? No answer. She walked downstairs. The kitchen was empty. The living room was empty. She checked the garage. His car was gone. A strange feeling settled inside her chest. She hurried back upstairs. The wardrobe door stood slightly open. Victor's clothes were missing. The suitcase was gone. No. She searched every room. Victor. Nothing. She grabbed her phone and dialed his number. It rang. Then voicemail. Again. Voicemail. Again. Voicemail. Her hands began shaking. Nathan rushed downstairs. Mom. Olivia followed behind him. What's wrong? Grace could barely speak. Your father. He isn't here. Nathan frowned. What do you mean? He left. Olivia shook her head. No. He wouldn't. Grace tried calling again. Straight to voicemail. Again. Nothing. Nathan grabbed his own phone. I'll call him. No answer. Olivia whispered. Maybe he went to work early. Grace looked toward the open wardrobe with tears filling her eyes. No. This wasn't work. This was goodbye. If you're already feeling the emotion building, don't forget to like this video, subscribe, and tell us in the comments. What would you do if someone you loved disappeared without a word? None of them knew that within a few hours, losing Victor would become the smallest problem they would face. Grace stared at the silent phone in her trembling hand, as if refusing to believe what it had just told her. Voicemail. Again. Nathan grabbed his jacket. I'm going to the office. Olivia quickly followed him. I'm coming too. Grace nodded weakly. I'll call his friends. For now, don't panic. But she was already panicking. 3 hours later, the front doorbell rang. Grace hurried to the entrance, hoping Victor had finally come home. Instead, two professionally dressed legal officers stood on the porch holding official documents. Mrs. Carter? Yes. I'm afraid we're here regarding this property. Grace frowned. What property? Your home. One of the officers handed her a thick envelope. She opened it with shaking fingers. The first words stole the air from her lungs. Foreclosure notice. She looked up in disbelief. There has to be some mistake. I'm sorry, ma'am. The mortgage has been in default for several months. Grace shook her head repeatedly. No. My husband never told me. Nathan stepped forward. What are you talking about? The second officer spoke gently. Mr. Victor Carter personally guaranteed several business loans. The company failed to repay them. The bank has legally taken possession of this property. Olivia whispered. So we're losing our home. Grace couldn't answer. Her knees suddenly gave way. The documents slipped from her hands as she collapsed onto the front steps. Nathan caught her before she hit the ground. Mom. Olivia burst into tears. The legal officers quietly stepped back, allowing the family a moment. Grace looked toward the empty driveway where Victor's car used to be. Why didn't you tell us? That evening the phone finally rang. Grace lunged toward it. Victor. Silence. Then his voice. Soft. Broken. I'm sorry. Grace's eyes flooded instantly. Where are you? I'm safe. Safe? She cried. We lost the house. The children are terrified. You disappeared. Nathan grabbed the phone. Dad, please come home. We can fix this together. Victor closed his eyes on the other end. I can't. Why? Because everything is gone. Olivia took the phone next. You promised you'd always stay. Victor couldn't answer. His breathing grew heavier. I failed all of you. Grace wiped away her tears. No. You made mistakes. But leaving wasn't the answer. A long silence followed. Finally Victor whispered. I love you. The line disconnected. Nathan called back immediately. The number no longer existed. No one spoke for several minutes. Grace slowly lowered the phone. Olivia wrapped both arms around her mother. Nathan stood beside them with clenched fists. I'll never let this happen to us again. Within 2 weeks the foreclosure became final. The Carter family packed everything they owned into worn cardboard boxes. Olivia carefully removed framed family photographs from the walls. Nathan carried the furniture out one piece at a time. Grace folded clothes while trying not to cry. She paused beside her wedding portrait. 20 years of memories. Reduced to boxes. Nathan quietly placed a hand on her shoulder. We'll build another home. Grace smiled through tears. We'll build a better one. Before leaving, she turned around for one last look. The front door closed behind them. Their old life ended with the sound of that lock. The rented apartment was small. Grace immediately took every job she could find. During the day, she cleaned office buildings. At lunchtime, she worked as a waitress. In the evening, she scanned groceries as a supermarket cashier. Late every night, she walked home under tired streetlights, carrying aching feet and a worn shoulder bag. Still, every morning she smiled at her children. Nathan noticed the blisters on her hands. Olivia noticed how often she skipped meals. Neither of them said anything. Instead, they made a decision. Nathan found work at a small electronics repair shop. The owner, Frank Sullivan, watched the teenager repair an old radio with surprising skill. "You've got good hands, kid." Nathan smiled. "I learned fast." Frank handed him a small paycheck. "You earned every dollar." Nathan stared at the envelope. It wasn't much, but to him, it felt like hope. Across town, Olivia started tutoring younger students after school. 10-year-old Ethan Lewis finally solved a difficult mathematics problem. "I did it." "You sure did," Olivia laughed. His mother shook Olivia's hand warmly. "You're an amazing teacher." "Thank you. You've helped my son believe in himself again." Olivia walked home smiling. She finally had money she could contribute. Late one night, the twins quietly spread their earnings across the kitchen table. Nathan counted carefully. 48, 92, 120. Olivia added hers beside his. "We're getting there." Nathan opened an old cookie tin hidden inside a cabinet. They carefully placed the folded cash inside. Grace entered the room unexpectedly. The twins quickly closed the cabinet. "You two aren't asleep yet?" Olivia smiled. "We were just studying." Grace kissed both of their foreheads. "I'm proud of you." After she went to bed, Nathan whispered, "One day she'll never have to work 3 jobs again." Olivia nodded. "I promise." They quietly linked little fingers. A promise neither of them would ever break. Years passed. Hard work replaced heartbreak. Graduation day finally arrived. Grace sat alone in the crowded auditorium. When Olivia accepted her diploma, Grace stood cheering louder than anyone else. When Nathan crossed the stage, tears rolled freely down her face. But beside her, one chair remained empty. The chair reserved for Victor Carter. Grace glanced at it only once before focusing on her children. Outside the ceremony, she hugged them tightly. "You've already made me the richest mother in the world." Nathan smiled. "We're only getting started." Neither of them knew fate was about to uncover a secret buried for decades. While cleaning an old rented storage unit connected to Victor's former business, Grace discovered a dusty, gray metal lockbox hidden beneath old blankets. Inside were manufacturing contracts, property deeds, loan agreements, and documents carrying forged signatures. Her breathing stopped. This wasn't just bad business. Someone framed him. Just then, a sudden noise echoed behind her. Grace spun around. No one. When she looked back, the gray metal box had vanished. Only a handful of scattered documents remained. Someone else knew the truth. Someone had been watching. And 20 years later, that stolen truth would walk into a boardroom and bring one of the biggest manufacturing empires in Ravenport to its knees. 20 years later, Ravenport had become one of the country's fastest-growing industrial cities. Towering glass buildings reflected the morning sun. Modern factories stretched across the skyline. Among them stood 2 manufacturing giants. One was Hale Precision Manufacturing. The other was Summit Forge Industries. Victor Carter had spent 2 decades rebuilding Hale Precision Manufacturing into a billion-dollar empire. He owned luxury homes, private aircraft. Awards lined every wall of his executive office. Business magazines called him a genius. But every evening, he returned to an empty mansion. One dining chair, one dinner plate, one lonely man. He often held the faded family photograph he had carried for 20 years. "Grace, Olivia, Nathan, I wonder if you could ever forgive me." No amount of money answered that question. Across the city, Summit Forge Industries told a completely different story. Employees smiled as they entered work. The company shared profits with its workers. No executive earned a bonus until every employee received one. The company's CEO, Olivia Carter, had become one of the youngest manufacturing leaders in the country. Nathan Carter served as chief operating officer. They led with compassion because they had lived through hardship. One morning, Nathan entered Olivia's office. "The acquisition report is ready." Olivia accepted the confidential file. "Hale Precision Manufacturing." Nathan nodded. "They're collapsing." Revenue is falling. The board is searching for buyers. Olivia slowly closed the file. I never imagined we'd see this day. Nathan looked through the office window. Neither did I. But this isn't revenge. It's business. And maybe it's destiny. Inside Hale Precision Manufacturing, panic had replaced confidence. Revenue charts glowed bright red. Executives argued across the boardroom. Victor stood at the head of the table. We can recover. One director shook his head. We've tried everything. Another added. Our lenders have lost confidence. A third director sighed. We have one realistic option. Victor already knew. Sell the company. Silence filled the room. The board voted. Every hand slowly rose. Except Victor's. His company, his life's work, was no longer his to save. Days later, Olivia and Nathan carefully reviewed Hale's financial records. Nathan frowned. Something doesn't add up. Olivia agreed. The numbers from 20 years ago don't match. They ordered every archived record connected to the original company loans. Boxes filled with dusty files arrived from storage. Hours passed. Then, Nathan suddenly froze. Olivia, you need to see this. She walked over. Spread across the table were old loan agreements, property deeds, manufacturing contracts. Every forged signature Grace had once discovered. Attached to them was another file, a newspaper clipping, a photograph. Leon Mercer, Victor's former business partner. Nathan whispered, "It was never Dad." Olivia slowly continued reading. Leon had secretly forged company documents, created fraudulent loans, transferred company assets, then disappeared with millions of dollars. Victor had accepted personal responsibility to prevent criminal charges against innocent employees. Ashamed of losing everything, he had walked away believing his family deserved better than living beside a broken man. Olivia wiped away a tear. He wasn't innocent, but he wasn't the villain either. Nathan nodded. He made the worst decision possible, but someone else destroyed our family. Summit Forge submitted an acquisition offer. The Hale board accepted immediately. The meeting was scheduled. Neither Victor nor the remaining directors knew who the buyers really were. The morning finally arrived. Victor walked toward the executive boardroom carrying a leather portfolio. He believed he was meeting strangers. The doors opened. He stepped inside. The acquisition contract slammed onto the polished conference table. Coffee spilled across financial documents. A fountain pen rolled toward the edge. Executives jumped to their feet. Victor looked up. Across the table stood Olivia. Beside her stood Nathan. Older, stronger, successful beyond anything he had imagined. His hands began trembling. Tears filled his eyes. It can't be. Neither of them spoke. The silence hurt far more than anger. Victor's leather portfolio slipped from his hands onto the marble floor. For 20 years, he had imagined this moment. Reality was far more painful. The boardroom doors opened again. Every executive turned. Grace Carter walked inside. Elegant, confident. Her hair carried graceful streaks of gray. Her eyes carried 20 years of strength. Victor slowly lifted his head. Grace. His voice cracked. I. No words came. Grace calmly stood beside her children. No hatred. No bitterness. Just quiet dignity. Several board members exchanged confused looks. One finally asked, "Does someone mind explaining what's happening?" Olivia opened an old file. "We will." She carefully placed the documents across the table. Loan agreements, property deeds, bank records, forged signatures, newspaper investigations. Nathan placed Leon Mercer's file beside them. This man orchestrated the fraud. He stole millions. He forged documents. He disappeared. Victor stared at the evidence. His breathing became uneven. "I never knew." Grace looked at him. "You never trusted us enough to let us help." Victor broke. He slowly sat down before covering his face with both hands. "I thought leaving would protect you." Grace replied softly. "No, it only made us suffer alone." The room fell silent. Several executives quietly wiped away tears. Victor looked toward Olivia and Nathan. "I don't deserve your forgiveness." Olivia answered honestly. "Forgiveness isn't pretending the pain never happened." Nathan nodded. "It's choosing not to let the pain decide who we become." Victor removed a folder from his portfolio. Inside were property deeds, personal investments, ownership certificates. "I want you to have everything. It should have been yours." Olivia gently pushed the documents back across the table. "We don't want revenge." Nathan extended his hand. "We want accountability." and we want peace." Victor stared at his son's hand. Slowly, he reached forward. Their handshake lasted only a few seconds, but it healed wounds 20 years old. Weeks later, Nathan walked into Victor's office. "We have one condition." Victor looked up. Nathan smiled. "We need an experienced manufacturing mentor." Victor looked confused. "You still want me involved?" Olivia entered. Not as the owner. As someone who can teach the next generation. Victor's eyes filled again. "You trust me?" Grace answered before anyone else could. "Trust isn't given. It's rebuilt. One day at a time." Victor quietly signed the employment agreement. Not as CEO. Not as billionaire. Simply, senior manufacturing mentor. Months later, hundreds gathered for the opening of the Grace Carter Leadership Center. Grace pulled away the ceremonial ribbon. The crowd erupted into applause. Olivia smiled proudly. Nathan clapped beside her. Grace placed one hand over her heart as tears rolled down her cheeks. Near the back of the crowd stood Victor. He wore a simple suit. No spotlight. No speech. He quietly applauded the woman whose strength had carried their family when he failed. For the first time in 20 years, his tears carried peace instead of regret. As the sun began to set, the family stood together outside Summit Forge Industries. They weren't the same family they had once been. They were stronger, not because tragedy had spared them, but because they had refused to let tragedy define them. Sometimes success isn't becoming the richest person in the room. Sometimes success is becoming the kind of person who chooses integrity over revenge, forgiveness over bitterness, and hope over despair. If this story touched your heart, don't leave without subscribing, liking this video, and sharing it with someone who needs this reminder today. And tell us in the comments, if you were Olivia and Nathan, would you have forgiven Victor or walked away forever?